Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. From Studio Winterthur, I'm back live. Thanks to Ed Morrissey for sitting in for me for the last 2 days. I'm joined by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you, wherever you are up north.
Well, you know, I'm patrolling. The Canadians are trying to flee Justin Trudeau, so I'm patrolling the border. There is no border patrol up here, and there isn't much on the southern border. Senator, let me begin by asking you, I have heard John Cornyn and Mitch McConnell. Have you had a chance to read the school safety bill yet, the red flag funding and the mental health funding, and whether or not you know if you're going to support it or not?
I have, Hugh. Unfortunately, we didn't have much time last night before we voted on it, so I voted against proceeding to the bill. But since then, I've reviewed it more carefully, and I will continue to be opposed to the bill. Like any legislation, it has some good measures in it. For instance, including juvenile criminal records and mental health backgrounds for gun purchasers under 21, or additional funding for training programs that help gun dealers recognize suspicious gun purchasers. But I'm very worried about the vagueness and the broadness of some of the other provisions. So, for instance, in the so-called red flag provisions, there's no structural limitations to ensure that law-abiding Americans have due process protections. There's only general vague language left to the discretion of Merrick Garland and Vanita Gupta after what they did, for instance, on sicking the feds on school board or parents attending school boards. I'm simply not willing to do that.
No, I anticipated that, Senator. Do you think you're also very objective about the Senate. Do you think there are at least 11 Republican votes to advance the bill to the House?
Hugh, I would assume there are, unfortunately, because I don't think this bill is moving in the right direction. But 14 Republicans voted yes last night on the motion to proceed. That's typically a preview of how they will vote on passage. I suppose it's possible that with more time to study the bill, as we had after that vote last night, or with potential amendment, that some of those Republicans may change their mind, but I expect it will pass.
Okay.
But I just don't think this is going to address the challenges we see. For instance, last night there was a conversation with bill authors and their staff about what specifically in this bill might have prevented the terrible shooting in Uvalde, and they couldn't point to a single specific provision.
You know, the Uvalde is not the reason to act, because the more we learn about what the police did, the more it becomes apparent that most, if not all, of the casualties could have been prevented with the best practices adopted by that school, right? Locking the doors outside and interior doors, and then the door wasn't locked. I mean, I'm just kind of stunned by that. Let me ask you about yesterday's Supreme Court decision 6-3 upholding the free exercise clause. You are a Harvard Law graduate. I have played Jeffrey Toobin's analysis. I've played other CNN analysts saying that the Establishment Clause is under threat. What do you say to them, Senator Cotton?
Well, the Establishment Clause is not under threat to you. What has long been under threat because of misguided and outdated Supreme Court cases is the Free Exercise Clause. And I'm grateful that the court once again ruled that when a state government wants to provide funding for parents on neutral grounds to educate, single out religious schools as uniquely disqualified from getting those funds. That's what the state of Maine had done. In districts where there were no public high schools, they would give state funds to parents to help educate their teenage children if they had prohibited it from going to religious schools. This is in keeping with other decisions that have been made in recent years. There was a case out in Montana a year or two ago. All these states should just get it through their mind that they cannot single out religious schools or religious institutions for unique or special kinds of mistreatment or debarment from federal funds. It was a big victory for religious freedom yesterday.
Yeah, but we have to keep winning the same war. It's the third time. The Chief Justice's audible sigh is in his writing, saying, how many times do we have to tell you that free exercise cannot be abridged in the name of a bad Establishment Clause doctrine? Senator, I want to talk to you about something I asked Congressman Gallagher about. If the House and the Senate flip in November, as I expect they will, back to Republican control, will you stay? Have you talked to the leader, McConnell, about advancing the appropriations process for DOD and the NDAA for 2024 so that we are not on the count? We don't have to wait a full year before getting the military fully funded and send that bill to the president quickly. I know the budget resolution has to come first, all that stuff, but really we can't follow the same calendar.
Well, I think that's a high priority, Hugh. The Department of Defense is the first priority of our federal government. It's not the ultimate or the highest role of government, but it's the most basic and fundamental role for government, which is to protect us from threats. It's not just another agency. It's not just another department that provides jobs to Democratic client groups. It protects all of us, and therefore its budget has to be determined in a separate fashion. You don't set your strategy based on your budget. You have to set your budget based on your strategy. So I would favor earlier movement on the annual defense bill and the defense budget. I would also favor taking the Department of Defense out of the kind of frozen animation that the government goes into anytime we have one of these short-term stopgap spending measures where you just continued last year's spending level, but more importantly, you don't allow an agency or a department to move funds around to different programs and priorities. It's one thing to do that in the Department of Commerce. It's another thing to do it in the Department of Defense, which has long-term, multi-year, multi-trillion-dollar weapons programs. They need that added flexibility on those occasions when Congress doesn't move quickly enough to get an annual budget passed.
Now, Senator, this will be a tough question for you. I have a column coming out in the Washington Post today saying Joe Biden's just got to shake it up. He's got to move Ron Klain over to replace Merrick Garland. He's got to get rid of the deadwood in the White House. He's got to put new secretary. Has any Biden cabinet secretary gotten even a C? It's a tough question. Has any of them done even an average job? Because I honestly don't think any of them have, but maybe you can think of one.
I can't think of one, Hugh. Most of them are down in the F territory, similar to their boss's grade. You know, a year ago, Democrats were talking about Joe Biden being the second coming of FDR and LBJ. I think at this point we would all just be satisfied if he could claw his way back to being the second coming of Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I'm glad the president wasn't hurt when he fell off of his bike, but metaphors like that one are pretty hard not to comment on, Senator.
Well, there's that bike meme on the internet that people have used hundreds and hundreds of times, and it looks like Joe Biden was living out the bike meme of putting a stick in his own spokes, and he's really put a stick in the spokes of America's economy and America's defenses over his first year and a half in office. It's time to get the sticks out of the spokes and start driving hard forward to a much better future for our country.
Last question, Senator.
Democrats are in charge in Washington.
Heather Boushey is a Biden economic advisor. She was on the Washington Post Live yesterday. And I'm not going to play you the whole quote, I don't have time, but she said, we're not worried about the recession or inflation because family balance sheets are strong and there's enough wiggle room to get through these times. Is that what you hear in Arkansas or when you're in New Hampshire or Iowa or wherever you're going?
But no, that may be what they say up in Northwest Washington when they're going to their fancy dinner parties because they've insulated themselves from the consequences of their own decisions. But when Arkansans are paying $4.50 a gallon for gas and $4 or $5 for a carton of eggs, there's not a lot of wiggle room. And to the extent family has wiggle room, it's getting tighter and tighter every month as budgets gets more and more crunched. So
I just had a trucker call from Columbus. $6 plus for diesel in Columbus. That means everything that is delivered is going to go up by $1.50 or 20%.
Yeah. Well, energy inflation is a particularly corrosive kind. As you say, Hugh, energy inflation affects every nation, the price of goods that our factories produce for us, and energy inflation ripples through the entire economy. Now, remember, the energy inflation we're seeing, whether it's the price of gas or the price of electricity, is not an unintended consequence. It's not an accident. This is exactly what the Democrats want to happen. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have proposed that we eliminate all fossil fuels from our energy mix in 10 years, Hugh, in just 10 years. That's 90% of all the electricity we generate in America. You know, they have this fantasy that we're going to move to wind and solar. Hugh, we get almost twice as much energy from wood, water, and crops in this country as we get from wind and solar. But the Democrats are putting their ideology ahead of your family's budget and our energy security and therefore our national security.
This is quick, Senator. The Washington Post ran a 2,000-word story yesterday on why there are no new refineries being built. Would you need 2,000 words to answer that question?
No, the answer to it is Joe Biden looking into a girl's eyes on the campaign trail and promising her, I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuels.
Yep. I wouldn't build a refinery either. Who would invest in a Senator Tom Cotton? Follow him on Twitter. Send Tom Cotton. Thank you, Senator.